Oh my God. Am I in the right station right now? Where's Harry? My God, right now. Harry is on a vacation. Maybe he's doing something very productive right now. You know, ladies and gentlemen, in the past weeks we discussed so many things about the political issues here in our country. And we discussed about human rights and how human rights is really effective to us, and human rights education is being perceived by people as something very useful to us. We also discuss about the clandestine operations on the left, and we discuss about fire protection. Right now, ladies and gentlemen, people might be looking at how the country is to be moved and how the country is to be looking forward for a better progress. You know, ladies and gentlemen, the main truth on how this nation is to be built is through economics and business. And for this day, we invited somebody who would discuss about how business is to be delivered and how business is to be moved and how business per se is to be looked forward pertaining to responsibility. This day, right now, we're in so many greedy people in the environment, in the industry, in the government that we have right now is making this nation so poor. And as me and Harry discussed in the so many episodes that we have right now is that greediness is a problem in this country. Now we would be talking about responsibility. Corporate social responsibility. People sometimes call it as corporate citizenship, business ethics, and even looking at the direction of how people would be handling business in a proper way. This day, we have a guest that we really look at him as somebody that would be authoritative in terms of social responsibility and business ethics. But the problem is that the industry wherein he is now managing has a problem in terms of the environment. And look at this point is that our guest is when I was talking to him, he mentioned to me that he is a history major, graduate in Cambridge University in Great Britain. And he's been here in the Philippines for so many years. And he's married to a Filipino wife. And he is somebody that, in terms of the direction of looking at a progressive country, is that he has somebody or he has something in terms of the wisdom in looking at corporate social responsibility is to be discussed right now. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce to you our guest. He is the president of the Philip Morris Portion Tobacco Corporation, Mr. Chris Nelson. Hello, Chris.
Thank you very much. Hello to you, Dr. John.
Yeah, hello, Chris. You know, Chris, your industry, which is tobacco, right now in our country, have so many problems, specifically on the aspects of the environmental studies and also looking at the concept of how this is to be a problem pertaining to the health of so many people. So before looking at that discussions pertaining to the tobacco, I'd like to ask you right now is that Philip Morris, then Fortune Tobacco. Then it was only Philip Morris, which is a separate company from that of Fortune Tobacco. Can you please give me a brief history of how Fortune Tobacco and Philip Morris merged as a company?
Sure. Philip Morris as a company has been in the Philippines many years, initially through a licensee. And then in 2003 we established Philip Morris Philippines with our own manufacturing plant in Batangas. Fortune Tobacco, of course, has been a long-time market leader. In 2010, we decided to combine together, and we created PMFDC on the 25th of February, to be exact. And that company came together because both people recognized that obviously there was benefits, from the side of Philip Morris and the side of Fortune. So obviously we're the leading tobacco company in the country, and we're a leading corporation, and we've been operating since February of last year.
So Chris, looking at the tobacco industry, wherein right now the government is campaigning for a no-smoking environment, is it really difficult for a president like you to manage a company wherein government regulations says that no smoking in the streets?
Well, let me clarify a couple of points. First of all, I think running a corporation is always difficult, whether it's tobacco or not. And let me also clarify in terms of smoking. First of all, there is a Tobacco Regulation Act. It was signed in July of 2003, which specifies where you can't smoke and where you can smoke. And smoking on the street is allowed.
Okay.
In fact, we supported the passage of the Tobacco Regulation Act. And what I'm pleased to say is that I think that's the kind of law which should be recognized. I think what you're making references is various ordinances which actually try to go beyond the actual national law. Now, just recently, the Secretary of the Department of DILG has actually issued a letter saying that local government should follow the Tobacco Regulation Act. So we as a company support the Tobacco Regulation Act, and I think if that pertains, it gives a national coverage to where you can smoke and where you cannot smoke.
Now, Chris, I've been to an organization wherein I look at the organization as pro-smokers. And this pro-smokers group says that there is such a thing as a responsible smoking. Is there such a thing as a responsible smoking?
Well, I would say yes. I'll give you another example of one of our programs. One of the major litterings, of course, could be cigarette butts.
Okay.
So we at PMFDC have actually started a campaign on littering. We've been given various municipalities specifically designed smoking receptacles, and we call it the Batu D2 campaign. And I think it's the correct, because we think adult smokers should smoke responsibly in the correct places they're allowed. And obviously what we're encouraging people is not to litter in general, but particularly for our cigarette butts.
Now, looking at the direction of a corporate social responsibility and corporate community relations, so what are the community relation activities that Philip Morris Sparks and Tobacco is doing right now?
Well, I think first of all you've got to define your communities.
Yeah, okay.
We can't, as much as we'd like to, you can't assist everybody. So let me just look at first of all the areas we deal in. First of all, the communities. Well, the communities that we support is, if you take now as PMFDC, those are the communities in Marikina, because obviously we have a production facility in Barangay Fortune. In Batangas, because obviously that's where we also have another factory. In the tobacco growing areas, that can be in Isabela, in Kawayan, Ilocos Norte, Ilocos Sur, La Union. Basically in those communities where we do business. I would branch out to a more national area. Philip Morris, as an entity, as a corporation, we also support disaster relief.
Okay.
So typhoons, any kind of crisis there. Education is another one of our areas, and poverty relief. So in terms of our focus, we're very much focused on the communities where we do business. We tend to heavily focus on education, because we think that's a major platform. And obviously we link it also to the tobacco growing communities where we work.
Yeah. So looking at this, what specific projects pertaining to education, disaster relief that you do in the community?
Well, let me break up the two, right?
Okay.
If I start about education, one of the major programs we've done on education is we've worked now with Knowledge Channel for many years. And we call it the Quality Education Proficiency. Knowledge Channel, as you know, is a satellite-based program.
Yeah.
It tends to bring educational programs to various schools. And we've been working with them to implement the Knowledge Channel throughout the country. So we've been as far north, as further north as Ilocos Norte right up. We've been down to Mindanao. So education. And also in education, we've been involved in giving textbooks, building classrooms. We've obviously worked with the Adopt the School program, which is part of DepEd.
Yeah.
In terms of disaster relief, well, that's more depends on when there's a disaster.
Yeah.
I mean, that's, God forbid, you don't want any disaster. In terms of who we work through in terms of disaster, we tend to work through organizations such as the Red Cross, the American Chamber. We've also done work, obviously, through, those are the two key organizations. And again, we tend to look at it. depending on obviously, hopefully,
Yeah.
or not hopefully, when those disasters may hit.
Now, you know, Chris, people who are anti-smokers or anti-tobacco industry would say that corporate social responsibility is indeed, in terms of the tobacco industry, is inherently something contradictory. So how could you practice corporate social responsibility at the same time these people would say that you are destroying the environment based on the tobacco, the smoke?
Well, I think there's a couple of things to say. First of all, I can't change the opinion of anti-smokers
Yeah, okay.
or those people who wish to have those beliefs. I think there's a couple of points to be made. The first is that we work and do business in this country. We are a significant excise payer. We also have, I think, a responsibility to the communities where we do business. So let me give you an example. Tobacco farming. Tobacco farming, you need to cure tobacco.
Okay.
That requires fuel. It can vary. A large time of that, it's trees. So we've implemented, directly ourselves and through our tobacco suppliers, an extensive tree planting program, over 1.5 million trees.
Yeah.
That's to make sure that it's sustainable and to keep the environment. So I think that does justify our corporate social responsibility as one aspect.
Okay.
The other thing I'd say is that I feel when you do business in a community or a country, you need to be able to give back. That's not just being philanthropic. There's actually an interest, because if the community thrives, you will thrive. The other area which I talk about is your own employees. Currently today in PMFDC we're about 2,500 people.
Okay.
Obviously 99% of those are Filipino nationals. So I think it gives pride as well as doing right for us to undertake corporate social responsibility projects.
You mentioned employees. You were with Philip Morris then, or were you with Fortune Tobacco before the merger?
No, I'm with Philip Morris. I've been with Philip Morris 25 years.
Okay, you're with Philip Morris for 25 years. Fortune Tobacco Corporation is known for unionism, wherein most of the radical lefts, the employees, the workers, specifically in the labor union, came from Fortune Tobacco. So what do you think about it, about unionism in terms of corporate social responsibility?
Well, look, we've obviously been working with the union since we combined and made PMFDC. So far, I'd have to say the relationship has gone very well.
Yeah.
We've also worked with the union on determining where we should do social projects in Marikina.
Yeah.
They're very keen on that. We're also keen to have a structured program for Marikina and the associating communities, similar to what we've done in Batangas. So I have to say that I see the union as being a help to us, particularly on corporate social responsibility.
Yeah, because there was a history in Fortune wherein most of the armed left came from the labor union of Fortune. So in terms of looking at the union handling right now, how do you utilize the union in the practice of a corporate social responsibility?
Well, I think when you look at unions, right, you look at their ties with the community.
Yeah, yeah.
I think also you've got to look at what projects make the most sense.
Yeah.
Let's start off with the principle. Nobody can do every project.
How about the outsourcing? Because most companies right now are doing outsourcing pertaining to laborers and workers. Is Philip Morris, Fortune Tobacco doing that also, the outsourcing?
No, what we do is we've always had, you know, what work has got to be done in-house and what work has got to be done outside.
Yeah.
So we've always had that. So no, there's no definitive policy there.
Yeah.
I think that the union relationship today we have at PMFDC with the union dealing in Marikina, because that's where they are, is working very well.
Okay.
I think also I'd like to think they appreciate that at PMFDC we have a structured approach to corporate social responsibility. We want to see projects. And that's something else I just wanted to mention about corporate social responsibility. I think it should be sustainable.
Okay, why sustainable?
Well, because I think if you do it once and once only, the impact is hard to see. So, for example, I mentioned about our investment education. One thing which I take quite a lot of pride in is we actually visit the projects. We don't just give a check. We actually go there ourselves. We look at the beneficiaries. Someone like Knowledge Channel goes again and looks at it and tries to measure what's the impact in terms of the quality of the education, as one example. So I think that's also very important to have a very structured approach, because that's when the communities will benefit the most, in my opinion.
Okay, you mentioned sustainability. I would now be coming up with the second part of the program. I'll be going over the hanging question. Usually, some corporators or some businessmen would say that the practice of corporate social responsibility is more of a covering up with some of the problems or some of the greediness being done by some companies. So, ladies and gentlemen, before we go to our commercial, is that at the second part of our program, our guest Chris Nelson will go on discussing further what is the meaning of corporate social responsibility. You know, he mentioned about how they handle problems in the company and how they look at the direction of a... One thing is that the company per se is looking at the point of how they manage people. They say outsourcing, they say the laborers, the unions. You know, in the practice of corporate social responsibility, there are so many aspects, specifically in the component of the hierarchy. Number one is the economic element. The number two is the legal aspects. The number three is the ethical concept. And the number four is the desired aspect, which is more of the philanthropic system and the practice of corporate social responsibility. You know, later on, as we discuss corporate social responsibility, so many things goes to my mind. Some says that, as I mentioned again, corporate social responsibility is more of just a cover-up of the greediness. Sometimes they say this term is just invented by some business scientists or political analysts or even corporate greedy people that would say that for us to hide the irresponsibility, let's come up with corporate social responsibility. You know, in this nation that we have so many problems, as I mentioned, greediness, corruption, and even the problem on how people have their values right now. Indeed, we have a problem pertaining to how to be responsible. You know, it is indeed so saddened right now that many of the Filipinos would think that they would like only to take up and receive something and do not give any more in return. Some businesses would say that let us earn profit and let's not give back something in return. So the concept right now is that we need to practice corporate social responsibility. So ladies and gentlemen, with that, come out right now with our break and we'll go on to the next part of our discussion. Great day, great evening, we're back. Earlier we discussed about the corporate social responsibility and we're now in the next part of our program. You know, as Chris mentions that they do practice corporate social responsibility in the different community wherein Philip Morris and Fortune Tobacco Corporation is located. They do practice in terms of responsibility on educating people and in terms of disaster relief and management. Now, people would ask right now, as I mentioned again, so many people hate smoking, and even environmentalists would say there is no such thing as a corporate social responsibility for tobacco industry. This tobacco industry is polluting the air, as they mentioned. Now, as again, ethics in terms of the responsibility. I mentioned earlier, before we end up with the show, the components of the corporate social responsibility. We have first the economic component, the legal component, the ethical component, and the philanthropic component. So I would like to ask right now, Chris, on the economic side of the corporate social responsibility, how do Philip Morris Fortune Tobacco practice economic social responsibility?
Well, I think when you look at the economic side of it, I mean, I was listening. I think there is always an economic element.
Yeah.
To be very, I'll give you an example. Let's take tobacco farming.
Yeah.
In the Philippines, we have a tobacco industry which is literally, we grow tobacco, we buy it, or we obviously convert it into the finished product. So it's like a cycle.
Yeah.
So one of the things that Philip Morris or PMFDC is looking for is continuing supply of good quality tobacco locally.
Yeah.
That means we need to sustain the farmers.
Yeah.
So for example, I think in 2004 or 5, there was a severe flooding in the Isabela area because they opened the dam.
Yeah.
What we did, we funded giving out rice to sustain the farmers economically, even though they'd lost their tobacco. I couldn't recover that season, but if I kept them going, they would then plant the following season and I could benefit.
Yeah.
So I think that shows an economic side of CSR.
So looking at the economic side is to make money. Fortune Tobacco or Philip Morris would just make money. That would be the economic
Look,
side.
I think the side of it is a business is in there to obviously give return and revenue to shareholders.
Okay.
Now, within shareholders, within the community, we have our employees and we have the people we deal with. I look at the farmers because we need to buy their tobacco. We want them to grow better tobacco. We want them to grow more tobacco, better quality. And for that, they get a better return. I also want to sustain that community. So if we can assist them, it works as a partnership together. And yes, we will benefit, and yes, they will benefit.
Okay, you mentioned the economic side. Let's go to the legal aspects. Doing business legally and what is right. So on the legal aspects of the corporate social responsibility, how do Philip Morris Fortune Tobacco is doing it?
Can you just clarify? I'm not sure I mean by legal. Legal in the sense
the legal
of...
way is that there are laws right now on environmental laws that we have.
Right.
How, do you comply with environmental laws?
Absolutely. We comply. Look, we're very strict in terms of all our application. We comply with all the laws. We comply with all the regulations. And we are very strict about that. We're very strict in terms of how we give assistance. We're a U.S. corporation, so we have to obviously fill requirements for the SEC and certain reporting standards. So we're very strict in how we apply things. We're very strict in abiding by the law and how we give our donations.
How would you now reconcile it on local ordinances that smoking would be prohibited in certain areas?
No, I don't have an issue. I think that's a totally separate area.
Yeah.
As I mentioned, I think we briefly discussed about that. There is a national tobacco law. So I think if I break the two up, if somebody passes an ordinance which is contrary to the national tobacco law, then I think what we do is we engage them and we show them the national law.
Would you think that the local ordinance is a violation or contradictory to the national tobacco law?
It can be, yes.
Yeah.
The national tobacco law, as I mentioned to you and as indicated by the DILG, should be the prevailing law.
Yeah.
And we've supported that law. We support areas where people shouldn't smoke. Equally, there are areas where people can smoke.
You know, Chris, I'm not so familiar about the national tobacco law. So what are the provisions, or can you please give me some understanding of what the national tobacco law is?
Like, the national tobacco law was signed in 2003. It stipulated what packaging is required, what areas of promotion and non-promotion. So, for example, back in 2003, there was still television advertising, radio advertising, billboards. Those were phased out in a time period within the law. It also specified where people cannot smoke. Schools, hospitals, stairwells, very specific areas, right? And then the implication is those areas where it's not specified, people can smoke. A good example is streets. And I think what was very important is if you read the opening paragraph of the law, it says it recognizes the issue of smoking, but it says there are stakeholders.
Yeah.
Tobacco farmers, the industry, as well as obviously groups on tobacco control. So the law, in my opinion, is very comprehensive. And when you look at smoking being a national activity, I think it makes sense that there should be a national law.
A national law.
Which there is, and that should prevail.
Now, as you mentioned, there might be contradiction of some of the provisions of the national tobacco law in contrast to that of the local ordinance.
Right.
Yeah. So how come there are no question on the ordinances being done by some tobacco industry on this local ordinances?
No, I think there are questions. I mean, it depends at what stage the questions are. There's been various discussions in different municipalities. Some municipalities, some provinces have issued and have then reconciled those ordinances with the Tobacco Regulation Act of 2003, which is, I think, RA 9224.
Okay.
So that has been going on.
Yeah. So was there a consultation on the tobacco industry when they come up with the ordinance?
There was a consultation with the tobacco industry when it was a national law. It depends. Different municipalities, we've had some consultation. Other instances, we haven't had consultation. Generally speaking, when people we've gone back to them pointed out the differences and discrepancies, in general, people then change those ordinances to fit with the national law.
Yeah. Now, let's go to the next component. We discussed the economic component, the legal component of the corporate social responsibility. I would like to look at now the ethical component.
Okay.
So, how do you reconcile ethics and this corporate social responsibility? For example, the Clean Air Act or the environmental laws?
Look, I think that we can reconcile the ethics. I think, first of all, as I talked about, we've just received an award. They call it the Stevie. This is an international business award for our work on reforestation. We recognize that within the farming, particularly for some tobacco, you have to cure the tobacco. For that you need fuel, whether it's a fossil fuel or it's trees. We've tried to sustain that by producing a program where the trees are not being diminished. There is actually, we're planting more trees than the farmers will use. We try and educate the communities on the sustainability, right? That the trees are important then for the environment, and yes, they can use those trees, but also the more they plant, they can sustain themselves.
How about those, Chris, people who died of lung cancer because of smoking?
That's a difference in terms of you can't link those two, right?
Okay.
I mean, obviously, you know, smoking is a hazard. It's well known. If you go on our website, you'll see it publicized, right? In fact, we have a very simple advice. If you have any concerns about smoking, then consult your doctors. Consult health practitioners. We're not in that area. In fact, if you have any concerns, then quit.
So, on that point, is that smoking is more of a choice?
In our view, it is a choice.
Yeah, it's a choice.
It's an adult, it's an informed choice. If you go to our website, you'll see a link actually to even, I think, on international, you can get to quitting.
So we should not blame the tobacco industry for those, blame themselves because it's their own choice.
We're obviously don't want anybody to have anything in circumstances. But what we're saying is most is risky, it's harmful, it's an informed decision. And if you have any advice, go to the health community, not to us.
You know, Chris, usually these are the problems. As a people only industry on this cancer that's to smoke of gaining sex and now based on your point right now is that it's more of a choice, a responsibility for people regards to cooking. So to our viewers now is that you should know how to be responsible enough. So but the problem right now is that people look at smokers as environment and are somebody that would kill the environment. So looking at that point, reconcile ethics and the health. I would go to the next. The philanthropy of social responsibility. So what are these philanthropy activities?
When you it's hard to break philanthropy from our overall approach, right? If one area which I could have it as well, right? One area I say is working with the arts. Philip Morris here in the Philippines has done the Philippine art for 17 years. We've advanced into, we believe, one of the visual art sculptures, right? We've seen develop and get now not just from the island of across the whole country. I'd say that's an example of philanthropy because that's the community we do. I think it's an area that is good for the community. We also think art has a lot of talent. We enjoy giving.
You mentioned the responsibility, the ethics. Usually, the models in this country, most tobacco company advertising, specifically cancer. Can you reconcile the more and social responsibility?
Well, Philip Morris calendars. We used women calendars. Fortune to that, right? Find out the difference. Now, fortune to have ladies on the calendar. I think that the way to look at it is I think that any who appears on any advertising with us, point fail, because there's no mainline advertising, at least 5 years or above. In terms of reconciling, I think what you look at is we are people who we want them younger. So using labels on the calendars, Fortune is done. Obviously we've some changes, right? I think in the right way. Philip Morris obviously as you see right. It's different brands.
So again, the responsibility. You mentioned activity on the different areas. Community relations, social accounting, and social auditing. Now, when you conduct social responsibility, you conduct social auditing and social accounting. Based on your accounting, on your corporate social responsibility, now the
well, in terms of do accounting, you don't actually work out value. I think do we think best is having a community? I mean, we don't do it like equation, right? Say, let's start with the college, right? And I'll obviously evaluate their program, the evaluation. They the use of programs and the standards go up as measured by the exam taken, right? Of the other one we measure is our work communities, right? For example, communities staying quiet. Does the number of farms planted for us go up? Activity and how we measure it doing well. It's the kind of evaluation we do. We don't do it like, we don't have a formula, if that's making sense.
Okay, there's a formula. When you do social marketing, part of the corporate social responsibility. Part of it is also the in mentioned that supporting programs in the knowledge channel.
We don't do programs.
You know,
The knowledge channel. Knowledge channel is the program.
okay.
We support knowledge channel installing satellite.
Okay.
We don't have anything to do with the program.
Maybe you could do that to GM.
Right? Yeah. So we have nothing to do with the program.
Yeah. So, the social responsibility, the philanthropic, the social auditing. Now, many organizations on the different community also look at your company as a source. Usually, non-government organizations in this country do go to big companies such as yours and abuse the policy. They would go to, hey, Mr. Chris, to give the you have certain parameters on organizations.
Yeah, sure. Organizations, I mean, Philip Morris and our Affairs Department, obviously, the corporations we've done, right? We look back. Again, I think it comes back to the area we focus on education, poverty relief, disaster relief, right? Like companies, we get solicitation led. Generally, the organizations.
This organization advocacy is aggressive, responsible, and organized democracy in this country, wherein we like violence, no war, no interaction. Is corporate social responsibility would also looking at supporting organization advocating for peace.
Like I doesn't have that's not a platform. I mean, we'd say
Yeah.
and we wish you all the best.
Yeah.
But it's not one of the ones to count because Philip Morris International works in
Okay.
and pieces would in the whole it's not the ones it's identified.
Well, for example, there would be the plant would be bombed by certain theories.
But God forbid that would ever happen. Technically, right?
It is happening in the evolutionary fact.
We have to deal with that. Look at it in different ways. Look at our future here. Yeah. But let me come back.
Yeah.
Right? We very much work on assisting communities and other work extensively with the Philippine which operation. So, and look, corporations.
Yeah.
We have to contribute what we can do, and we have to do it in specific areas. And I think do it over a number of years.
Yeah.
For me, one-offs are less useful, not bearing in mind disaster relief, because obviously that depends where it happens. And I think if you sustain it, that gets more impact in those areas.
Yeah. You know, I'm now looking at more of the effect and not the cause.
Right.
Yeah. No. How about the prevention of certain problems? Would you looking at that also as a main thrust of the corporate social responsibility? As you mentioned, education is a part of prevention.
I think the reason we focus on education is, and I think if you look at education, if a community or a country, doesn't have to be the Philippines in general, has a higher standard of education, generally that drives a higher economic standard.
Yeah, because education could prevent terrorism, education could prevent poverty, isn't it?
I think it could.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying I'm an expert in those areas. I think I would defer that to you.
Yeah.
But I do think that education does specifically help in terms of poverty or overall standards. And the other area we do work on is poverty relief, or what we call livelihood.
Yeah.
So we've been involved in livelihood projects in Batangas, in the local communities, because we really want to keep those local communities supported.
You know, giving livelihood would sometimes make people just a parasite. And they would say, oh, this is Fortune Tobacco giving so many livelihood programs.
Well, I think the difference is it's got to be a sustainable livelihood.
Okay.
So, for example, which I can talk in terms of Batangas, because we've been doing it for a number of years, we've got local projects